Okay, so I want to talk about when Friends, the TV show, was pressured to be diverse. Okay, talking about forced diversity. Okay, so when Friends was on, people sort of picked up on that there wasn't sort of this brown or black coded representation on the show. And there was, I wouldn't say the uproar, but there was this pressure where they basically put an actor on the show, and I think they had mm, like a season arc, and then they were off, which I just think sort of illuminates or illustrates the issue with forced diversity. First of all, there was nothing really wrong with the show. Okay, um, it was a friend group, and that's natural. That it was reflecting reality. Are you saying that someone with a group of friends, like that's, I think they did a study where they said like people hang out with people within their population. That's what they were doing on the show. Hanging out with people within their population. Even people sort of in your circle navigating life, they're going to be people within your population. Even in New York City. Yes, you can be like a white identified person and you live in New York City, and all the people you sort of really talk to and interact with, not just like cashiers or something, but you have little conversations with and that type of thing, like happened on the show, or more acquaintances and flings or whatever, they would still be white identified people in a diverse city, just as cosmopolitan city as New York, and that's nothing's wrong with that. That happens a lot, and that happens with all other populations as well. So, what was the huge problem there? It was just this sort of um, forced diversity. It's like this entitlement that some color cast people have where they feel like they need to be wedged into all these different shows. Okay? We, the, here's the thing, the goal should have always been, the only issue was that sort of almost propaganda level of representation where it was like these caricature stereotypes and these sort of degrading, dehumanizing, sort of stigmatizing roles, right? A lot of time in TV, it was just like thug roles or, fetish, passive, submissive, sex pot, and, all those sort of tropes and stereotypes. And then some more biased stuff, right? And then sometimes it's not wrong to say portray black and brown coded people as criminals, this and that, because that's real and it's also fiction. That was the only problem. That's where we need. Once that was done, we could have stopped there because it's like it's almost forcing someone to be our parent. It's giving pathetic energy where um it's giving pathetic energy where it's like we are acting like these infantilized dependents who are forcing people to be our parents and providers. These corporations, these companies don't have to represent us. We should have naturally just created our own companies and corporations because first of all, if these people didn't like us, which is why they didn't put us on TV, why are you asking someone that doesn't like you to represent you? They don't like you. And then that's almost like rewarding them. Like with Disney, Disney started very recently giving this sort of somewhat substantial representation, but they didn't for decades, and it was more degrading, like off things. So now they only started doing when they realized that they can make money. So you're essentially rewarding them for being casteist, for being discriminatory, for being biased, and it's the same employees that work there that are doing it who are now profiting off of our cultures and likeness and all that type of thing. You rewarded them for being casteist. You rewarded them for being discriminatory. They didn't like us. Why do we insist on treating these people like our saviors and our providers and our parents? Like we are these pathetic, infantilized dependents. Okay? That's it. So forcing diversity on Friends was just Wrong. There's no reason, there's no purpose for it. Okay. Um and then it's like so awkward. It was like, and then another issue is like that they're writing from their experience. Most writers write from their experience. That was their experience. Like it's so awkward when there's forced diversity because of course there's no rules to writing. I'll write about Vikings. I never met one. Okay, and I'm not saying that we're like objects or like caricatures, but still, I'm saying you don't have to even know people to write about different cultures and appearances and whatever. But when we force these people, it's just always awkward. Like they don't know how to write those people because they don't have experience with those people. So it's either always like this overcorrection where there are these but not like these early representation movies. It was like the black coded person was always like they would code them as like smart genius, super nice benevolent type, like overcorrection, or like they never know how to write like tribal or flavor of a character, right? It's always like preppy and suburban because they don't know how to write like hood and country or Creole or like tribal culture because they don't know it. Okay, and then it was so awkward. I think it was like what Aisha Tyler. It's like they put her on a skateboard and pushed her. Like that's what it felt like. They put her on a skateboard, pushed her in the scene. She came on camera and went off camera. Like it felt like a chore, but you could feel it. Like it felt like they were just getting it out of the way, which they were because they were forced to do it. Like, huh? These writers are writing from their experience, so right. Like there was one show, The Girls on HBO. They pressured her to do forced representation too, and it was like she just did like a magical Negro character because she doesn't actually know black identified people. From her perspective, that's her perception, her perspective. So that's what she wrote. Like, why are you making people write about something they don't even know? Like, it makes no sense. Okay, we should have just created our own companies, and it doesn't have to be a black company or a brown company, a cosmopolitan company. Like, here's the thing: it's like white identified people, Oriental identified people, they're just going to be y'all are just born self-absorbed. It's very hard for you not to be self-absorbed. Who cares? That's not inherently bad. So like we should stop trying to pry you out of that. um it's not gonna happen. So why can't there be like this Oriental white cast? It wouldn't even be cast anymore. This white sort of centric media and company. Like we can coexist, and then some cosmopolitan companies, and then let them do shows where we're barely in it or not in it at all, and that's okay. Lord of the Rings was okay, but then there's that toxic stuff in it, like we're supposed to be the orcs and the goblins, so that's not great. But fantasy films where we're not in it at all, like okay, and I mean it's getting worse now because like black identified people are overrepresented in the media, and they're still whining and complaining for it. Like that makes no sense. You know what I'm saying? So you know then we would have these TV shows and movies and stuff coming from these companies, cosmopolitan companies, where like the few white identified people who are not self-absorbed, they would be in these cosmopolitan countries where it's more organic and natural, where a show is mostly white identified people, but it's actually written by white identified people who actually interact with other people. Like those writers were very insular and insulated, writing from their experience. Nothing wrong with that. But to be a little counter to this, yes, Friends could have increased their representation just a bit, okay, because it was set it was set in New York. And as I said, it's normal for all like those one episode people, bit players, whatever you call them. Most of them were white identified. That's still okay, but a few of the bit characters could have been other populations because it is New York City. Like, I mean, it's not that insulated, but that's it. That's about as much as I have to do. No, like, guest characters, no arcs, especially when it's like forced romance and relationships. Like, I think it was like Ross's girlfriend. Like, that did not have to happen. Like, uh, some of the big characters that have like a line or two. I mean, that was a bit like off. Like, what's the point of setting it in New York? Set it in a city where it's like that should have been like in, I don't know, somewhere else where the population is like 90% white identified people. But other than that, I didn't see an issue with it. And then like with Julie, that was more natural. Like that's it, like those representation doesn't make sense to me. Like like they always force these like black and white identified couples when it's like a white person's most likely to marry like you know someone with mestizo origins or like a oriental caste person. So why don't you portray that?